what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight is going to be bookish content. For today's video, we're going to go over the 11 books I read in the month of November, which I think is a record for me. 11 books in 1 month, that's insane. So let's jump right into it. The first book I completed in November, I actually started in October and I finished it on November 1st, and that is Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shea Ernshaw. This is a sequel of sorts to the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas, and it focuses on Sally. She is now married to Jack Skellington. She's the Pumpkin Queen of Halloween, but she's having an identity crisis. She doesn't feel like she belongs. She's very overwhelmed, and one day when she runs away, she comes across another tree and discovers Dreamtown. But then hell breaks loose and now she has to fix her mistakes. I really wanted to love this book because The Nightmare Before Christmas is my favorite movie of all time. I know all the songs by heart. I can quote that movie word for word. I don't even have to be looking at the screen to know what's happening. And Sally has been one of my favorite characters of all time since I was like 6 years old. I've grown to love her. But this book did not meet any of my expectations. I was not a fan of this book because I gave it like 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's sad because this book actually has a lot of really cool ideas. I like the idea of hidden doors because if you've seen The Nightmare Before Christmas, you know the code with the doors. They're all doorways to holidays. Dreamtown's not a holiday town. It's a whole other universe that Sally is discovering, and I just thought that was such a neat concept because it still brings in mythical creatures that don't necessarily have a holiday associated with them. And not only that, but Sally did get to explore all the other doors. So we got to see literally every town, whether that was Easter Town, Thanksgiving Town, and how all of those holidays manifest themselves. So if this was an original story, I think it would be really clever on the author's part. However, the reason I gave it such a low rating was Sally's characterization. I thought Sally's characterization was just way off. Because in the movie, Sally isn't really this self-conscious about anything. Like, she couldn't care less about becoming the Pumpkin Queen. If she is, she is. If she's not, she's not. At least she's with Jack. I mean, she has some things like hinder her path, like the Oogie Boogie Man, but like still, it was like explicitly said multiple times in the movie. She was one of the smartest people in Halloween Town. She was a lot of people's go-to. And in this book, she's just the exact opposite. She's full of self-doubt. She makes a lot of dumb choices I can't imagine movie Sally making. And she comes off as so young in this book. I don't know her like canon age in the movie because I mean she's a rag doll. She could be made into an adult but technically only be 5 years old, if that makes sense. But I'm pretty sure she's supposed to be an adult in the movie. Her and Jack are adults. They're not supposed to be teenagers, which granted, they're not necessarily teenagers in this book, but that's what she feels like. She feels like a very young teen. And not only that, but I feel like the age group is wrong, I guess, because it's advertised as young adult, but the writing is very juvenile. It very much feels like a middle grade. So I don't know. I had some expectations going into this. They weren't met. 2.5 out of 5 stars. So then we have Once Upon a Midnight Eerie by Gordon McAlpine, and this is the second book of the misadventures of Edgar and Allan Poe. This series is about Edgar and Allan Poe, who are the great-great-great-great-grandnephews of Edgar Allan Poe, and just the shenanigans they get into. In the first book, their cat was stolen, so they had to go to Kansas. And in this book, they're making a movie, so they have to make their way to New Orleans. I gave the first book 3 stars just because it wasn't as creepy and kooky as I wanted it to be, because I mean, like, it's inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. This book is also a 3-star read, but I did like it better than the second because I got some of the kookiness I was looking for. Ghosts are involved in this, which I would hope so because it's New Orleans. Like, the world is your oyster if you have a story taking place there. It involves new characters. We meet Em and Millie, who are Emily Dickinson's great-great-great-great-grandnieces, and they play off Edgar and Allan really well. And the story was just cute, so this was an enjoyable read. Again, 3 out of 5 stars. Then we have Demon Slayer Volume 15 by Koyoharu Gotoge. This series is about a boy named Tanjiro whose sister Nezuko is turned into a demon, so Tanjiro joins the Demon Slayer Corps in order to turn her back into a human. 15th book in a 23-book long series, so I obviously can't give the synopsis of this, but I will say it begins with a huge plot twist, and it starts a new arc, and it's a fun way to start a new arc. For those of you caught up in the series, it's the, what's it called, the Hashira training arc. And that arc's really fun, so I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then we have Demon Slayer Volume 16 by Koyoharu Gotoge. So we see the end of the Hashira training arc, and we begin what I'm assuming is the last arc of the series, which is kind of shocking because this is book 16 out of 23. But what a way to start that arc. And my heart was pounding near the end there because my favorite character was in peril. So 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is Together We Rot by Skyla Arndt. This is about a girl named Will whose mother has disappeared and she is trying to find out what happened because she is so sure the neighborhood cult is involved. She teams up with her ex-best friend Elwood, whose father is the preacher of said cult, and Elwood agrees to join up with her because his father is now trying to kill him. There's a lot going on in this book. I am in my cult era, which is why I started reading this. If you watch my October reading wrap up, you know what I mean by cult era. I didn't do it on purpose. I just, for some reason, got interested in it. And one of the coolest things about this book is just I thought it was such an interesting way to create a cult. So Elwood's dad is the preacher of the Garden of Adam. It is a Christian church. They mention in the book, like, our Lord, Savior, Jesus Christ, blah, blah, blah. But the reason I find it so interesting is because it's called the Garden of Adam, and you know, we know about the Garden of Paradise, Adam and Eve. And Elwood is supposed to be the sacrifice to the land. And to save from spoiling, I just thought it was really cool, just the imagery of nature, and when you compare to the Garden of Adam, the garden we read about in the Bible. The imagery of this book was really beautiful, and I think it's one of the author's strong suits. It's not so much characterization. I had a few qualms with that, but also just to keep on the theme of the good things I liked about this book. I did cry at the end. Why? I don't know. But I felt like the way it was worded, it just ended on a really good, wholesome note of sorts. Wholesome's not the word I want to use. It did end on a beautiful note. Now, as for characterization, I did like Elwood more than I liked Will. Elwood was very sweet, and I think him as a character was just a great depiction of what happens, of what cults can do to people and how they just beat people to the ground. Because Elwood did not want to stand up to his father. I mean, Elwood's turning, at this point in the book, he's turning 18 within like a week or something, and was so scared of his father, couldn't stand up to him, even though his friends were like, dude, it's your life, you gotta do it, you gotta do it. And he's like, no, my father says I have to do this, so I gotta do it. He was fearful, he beat himself down a lot, and like, what I'm saying is sad, but it is what cults do to people. Do you think it was an interesting choice making the victim of this cult a boy? Just because I feel like male victims of cults are often overlooked. As for Will, the female character, the female lead, she kind of annoyed me. I learned to like her by the end of the book, but throughout the book she was so hard to read from. She always had an attitude with everyone, and I get it, her mom disappeared, but it's like even before that, like that was just her as a person. Always had an attitude with people. She was always quick to snap back. And like oftentimes you're kind of supposed to be on her side throughout the story, but there are moments in this book where it's like, dude, was that necessary? Did you have to speak to him like that? You know what I mean? She was just a typical, like, apathetic, I don't care, sarcastic asshole character that was popular, like, back in the 2010s. She very much felt like a character I was reading back when I was in late middle school, early high school, which so, like, I'm now wondering, maybe that this author must be the same age as me, because I could see the influence from 2010s YA, but God, like, I've definitely moved on from that type of character. And half the book is in Will's point of view because it switches POVs. It goes from Will to Elwood and they bounce off each other. So like half the book was just really hard for me to get through. But all that is to say, I still really liked the plot. I still really liked Elwood, so you know, I really liked half the book. So I gave this about 3.75 to 4 stars. Then I read Demon Slayer Volume 17 by Koyoharu Gotoge. And you know what? Fuck this volume. My favorite character fucking dies within the first couple chapters. And I had no time to mourn because the author just went straight to a different part of the fight, to different characters. I was a mess. I didn't have time to stop because the pacing in this volume is so fast. I will say though, this volume is making me realize the author's writing style. I think I do say in the beginning of my Demon Slayer journey, it's kind of obvious when she first started writing the story. She didn't really know, she isn't the author, she didn't really know where she wanted it to go. So she was writing as she goes along, and I very much saw it in this volume because the author introduces things in flashbacks in the middle of these fights, but they were never mentioned earlier in the story. There was barely any foreshadowing to said things. So some of the fights in this volume don't pack as much as a punch as I think the author was going for. So it's something I've noticed, but it's not like it's not hindering my enjoyment of the series too much because this volume was still fun and I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read There by Tommy Orange. This book is about 12 Native Americans, specifically from the Cheyenne tribe, who are all trying to gather at the same powwow. Each character has their own point of view, so you are going to be reading from 12 different point of views in this book, and yet each point of view is very well written. And I was interested in the choices made because some of them are in first person. You would think they would all be in first person, but only some are in first person, some are in third, and one's actually in second person. I don't know how I feel about that for what the author was going for and why he made that choice, but it still is a very interesting choice to me. I really liked how all of these people were connected in some way, but in the smallest way possible. It kind of bounces off the theme of it's a small world after all. This book explores the themes of identity and community, and I really think by doing that, by having them connect in the smallest ways, it really enforces the theme of community. This book also explores the theme of cultural trauma, which is more prevalent in the ending of the book. And having said that, I will say if you don't like open, ambiguous endings, do not read this book because this book has one of the most open endings I have ever read. I have an idea for what the author was going for and what he was trying to say by doing that, and if I'm correct, then I really like the book because I think I don't want to say what my idea is because I would be spoiling, but I think it really packed a punch by ending it like that. But if I'm not correct, I don't know if that would change my opinion necessarily, but assuming I'm correct, this book is great, 4.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read was Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. If you don't know who Jill Duggar is, her family was a famous TLC family. They were a part of 19 Kids and Counting, and she is one of 19 children. Again, I'm in my cult era. Her family was part of the IBLP cult, which is a fundamentalist Christian cult. And this is her memoir of growing up in that program, being on TV, and eventually leaving IBLP and how that affected her relationship with her family. Girlies, I have been weirdly fascinated by the Duggar family ever since I was young. Even as a child, still in elementary school, I knew this family. Something was so off about this family. And just to give you guys an idea of IBLP, the big idea of it is that you are supposed to make a quiver full of children. You are supposed to have so many babies because you are creating God's army. Children are a gift from God. They don't believe in birth control. You have to have as many children as God wills, which is why this Michelle Duggar decided to have 19 kids. Back in the day, because now they wear modern clothing, but back in the day they would wear these prairie dresses while guys always wear khakis and the polo shirts, being 15-year-old kids looking like they were 40. Strict gender roles, very homophobic society, racist, transphobic. They don't believe in higher education. Higher education is of the devil. A lot of things are of the devil. The book literally opens up with Jill saying her parents didn't believe in dancing. They weren't allowed to listen to certain types of music. They weren't allowed to listen to most music, actually. TV is prohibited just because sin and all this stuff. Just think of the most religious Christians you can think of, and that's the group the Duggars were a part of. But while they were on TLC, the parents always put on this happy picture, everything's normal, we're fine. But in 2015, that's when people started realizing this family is bonkers, because it got out that the oldest child, Josh, molested 5 girls, 4 of which were his sisters. Josh was also part of the Ashley Madison scandal. If you don't remember that, Ashley Madison is the website people sign up for to cheat on their partners. And Josh is currently in federal prison for possession of child sexual assault material. All of this Jill talks about in her memoir. This book was a train wreck I could not look away from. It's so hard to rate on a writing scale just because I've talked about this before. When I rate memoirs, I feel like I'm rating the shit they've been through, and I don't want to rate their lives, but I am rating this as a book and how I felt about it. I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. Despite everything that happens in this memoir, it was very engaging. If you guys remember, I read her sister's book earlier this year, Ginger's book, Becoming Free Indeed. It's not really a memoir, it's more of a textbook on her new church, and I hated it. 1 out of 5 stars. One of my complaints about that book is that it didn't, despite being by Ginger Duggar, it was just so obviously ghostwritten because it just didn't feel like Ginger's language and how she would talk. The narrator was too smart, no offense to Ginger, too smart, too intelligent to be her. Whereas this book, the way it's written, Jill has been honest about having a ghostwriter as well, but it still feels like Jill's words. She was completely honest about her upbringing, about how hard it was before TLC came into the picture. She was basically exposing a lot of her lies her father has told the public. because for the longest time we were led to believe, or he was trying to tell people didn't really believe him though. He was trying to tell people they were well off before TLC, and Jill was like, yeah, that's not true at all. For years, people believed the children were being paid for the TV show, and Jill revealed that they were not. All of that money went to their father's pocket. She didn't see a dime until she sued her own father. And she does talk about what happened with Josh, which was the hardest part of the book. I actually recommend listening to this on audiobook because she does read it, and during these parts she does get very emotional. She does not go into detail about the molestations, which is totally her right, because that whole situation's so messy, because personally I'm glad we're aware that Josh is the monster he is, just because I don't want people like that to get off scot-free. But I do hate that during that process Jill and her sisters had to get re-victimized. The documents weren't redacted enough, so even though the names and the ages of the girls were hidden, they forgot to redact the fact that 4 of these girls lived in his household, so the general public was able to guess that they were his sisters. And Jill talks about the nightmare she had to go through with this, because she buried so much just for this whole thing to resurface a lot. And you can hear her voice in the audiobook, you can hear her voice crack as she talks about this. And it just makes me feel so sad, because I hate that she was the victim all over again. And then even though her brother committed these crimes, it was her trauma that was put at the forefront. But girl, she called out those people by name in this book. She called out In Touch, she called out the police department and other people that were involved. Every time the topic came up, she called them out by name, and good for you, girl. I had an audible reaction to Jill telling her father, "You hate me more than my pedophile brother," and I was like, no fucking way you said that. Good for you. Because Jim Bob Duggar threw a fucking fit that she wore pants and got a nose ring. Meanwhile, his son is doing the things he was doing on the computer. There are some things in this book I disagreed with her on, because she set the record straight about why her and Derek left the show. They chose to. They did exit interviews. However, those interviews were never aired, and it led a lot of people to believe they got kicked off the show, because at the same time, Derek, Jill's husband, was going on a rampage on Twitter. Jill refers to it as Derek speaking his mind, when in reality he was just making a lot of transphobic comments about Jazz Jennings. Our views on whether or not Derek was speaking his mind differ, but what have you. And our views on her parents are different. A lot different. I still think her parents are shitty people. She tries to save face for her mom in this book. I am of the opinion Michelle's a shitty mom, because she just hands off her children to her older kids. She doesn't take care of them. She let a lot of these things happen too. I think Jim Bob and Michelle are both terrible people. However, I'm also well aware that's easy for me to say because they're not my parents. So yeah, I disagree with Jill that Michelle is a great person, but I understand where she's coming from. Like, that's still her mom. So because of that, certain parts of this book was a little frustrating, but like that tends to happen with a memoir. You're not going to agree with everything someone's saying, because you're not reading about a fictional character, you're reading about a real human being. As you can see, this memoir makes me feel a lot of emotions, which, I mean, I guess it's a great thing for a memoir. But despite Jill and I having differing views on other things still to this day, I really still like seeing her deconstruction. She didn't explicitly call it that, but you could just tell there's like a gradual deconstruction from just such a strict cult into where she is now. She's still a Christian, she's still a believer, which nothing wrong with that when she's not hurting anyone. Her homophobic and transphobic views are one thing, but like loving Jesus and believing in Jesus, there's no harm in that. And I like seeing her come to terms with that, and I like seeing how she would explain that to herself, like, yeah, I'm not gonna go to hell for getting a nose ring. You know, it's not a way to attract men, I just think they're cute. And it's like, you go, girl. Jill Duggar 10 years ago wouldn't be thinking that. You go, so you go, girl. And I'm just glad she's at a place where she's come to terms with the fact that she won't go to hell for doing simple stuff like taking a sip of alcohol, having her nose ring, you know, doing a little dance here and there. And I'm genuinely curious to see what her future holds. This was a great read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Sandman and the War of Dreams by William Joyce. This is the fourth book in the Guardian series, but each of these characters are based on a mythical being. They're not explicitly called that, except for Sandman, I guess. But you have Nicholas St. North, who's implied to be Santa Claus. You have E. Aster Bunnyman, who's implied to be the Easter Bunny, Toothiana, who's implied to be the Tooth Fairy, and now the Sandman, who we can guess who he is. They're all trying to fight the Nightmare King. I gave the first 2 books 3 out of 5 stars. The third book, 4 out of 5. This book 3 out of 5 just because it was mostly backstory for everyone. I just felt like the stakes were very low and the cliffhanger from the 3rd book was solved way too easily. But I'm excited to see what the last book holds because there's 5 books in this series, so we'll see. Then I read The Sea in Winter by Christine Day. This is about a girl named Maisie who tore her ACL and is in the process of healing, but she's going through a rough time because right now she can't do ballet, and ballet was her life. So in this book, she is trying to come to terms with that. So I started reading this book because the Christmas season was kind of upon us, and I was looking for Christmas-themed middle school books to listen to at work just because they're easy to multitask to. This one was recommended to me. It's not a Christmas book, it just so happens to take place in winter, but winter as in February. But I still really enjoyed this. I think the story was a wonderful exploration of a girl just grieving the loss of something that was so important to her. Just grieving the loss of identity, I guess is a great way to say that. Just because ballet took up so much of her life, all her friends were there, she would constantly relate what she was doing to a ballet flashback. The whole accident that caused her to tear her ACL was ballet related. And now she doesn't know what her future holds, and that's scary for anyone. It wasn't explicitly said until the end of the book, but Maisie is suffering from depression and anxiety, and it was a type of rep that I was actually kind of shocked I related to just because of our age difference. Maisie in this book is only like 11, 12 years old. I'm 26, and here I am relating to a child. Certain aspects of this hit very close to home, and I think that's wonderful. If like being this age that I am and I could still relate to a book like this, it lets you know that the author knows what they're talking about, and it lets you know that those feelings are real. What I really liked about this book is the land and all the allegories that relate back to Maisie's story, because this takes place in Seattle. She goes on a hike with her parents in land that's very important to her family. So Maisie is Native American. Her mother is of the Makah tribe, and I forgot what tribe her father was a part of, but some parts of the land are very important to both these tribes. For example, the Makah, the water, like the river, was what was very important to the Makah. And Christine Day was able to make allegories relating to the river that would essentially relate to Maisie's story. And they were used as lessons to overcome the crossroads that she was in. And I just thought that was so clever, and it made the story feel so much more personal. And girl, the ending to this book made me tear up just because the problem wasn't solved easily, which I really appreciate just because I think that's a huge part of Maisie's journey. It was still a nice ending in a sense of contentment that I was looking for. The only gripe I have about this book is that at one point the mom goes on a speech that feels a little too on the nose and kind of cheesy. You know, the type of speeches you see in like YA coming of age movies. But it was forgivable. It was like, because at the same time it was definitely something Maisie needed to hear, and I thought it was beautiful in its own way. But this was just an unexpected, enjoyable read, and I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book I read in the month of November was Demon Slayer Volume 18 by Koyoharu Gotoge. Girl. So in this volume, we get this guy's backstory, and it lasts a few chapters. Like, it's a huge chunk of this volume. And let me tell you, I sobbed the biggest ugly cry while reading that. I had not cried this hard for a character since way earlier in the series. I had tears down my face, my eyes were swollen, I was like gasping for air. I was not expecting this guy, one of the villains, one of the antagonists of the series, I was not expecting him to have such a heartbreaking backstory. I had a rough time reading this. Girl, I was an emotional mess. And then I wasn't expecting, there's 2 characters in this who have like a very small connection to each other, and nothing could have prepared me for the fact that these characters would have that connection. It was totally unexpected, but I loved it, and I'm so excited to read volume 19. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars. Woo! Okay, that is it for this video. I was tripping over my words. The raw footage of this is going to be like an hour, and I'm going to be able to chop off like half of it because of all the tripping and stuttering I was doing. But let me know your thoughts down below about any of these books if you read any of them, and let me know what other books you guys have read in November. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe, y'all know the drill, and without further ado, I'm going to peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao tutti!